Welcome to the Domain Name Wire podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Alleman, and this is episode number 559. Squarespace is one of the biggest domain name registrars in the world after gobbling up Google domains. It's in the top 5 when it comes to .com registrations. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Kevin Doerr, the SVP and GM at the company who oversees the domain name business. Kevin knows a lot about domain names and previously oversaw part of the domain name group at GoDaddy. We talk about Squarespace's new reseller API, why the company joined the Internet Commerce Association, how Squarespace services different types of customers, and discuss how AI will impact the domain name business. First, a word from our sponsor. Our sponsor this week is Salve.com. Salve offers low-cost backordering. Backorder.com domains for only $10.49, .nets for $12.12, and .app domains for only $4.99. This week, you can bid on marathon.bet, living.me, and silence.me, among other domains. See these domains and start backordering at sav.com/DNW/backorder. That's sav.com/DNW/backorder. Well, this week marks the third week of a domain name industry event in a row. First, there was Domain Days in Dubai, then the ICANN meeting in Dublin. This week is NamesCon in Miami. I'm moderating 2 panels on Wednesday. At 10 a.m., join me as I interview Mike Mann, Josh Reason, and Braden Pollock. Each of these domain investors has very different domain portfolios. We'll talk about their domains, how they price them, and where they sell them. Then at 2 p.m. on Wednesday, I'll interview Shane Lehman of MarkMonitor and Gerardo Verani of Freename about Web3's intersection with domain names. I look forward to seeing you there. And speaking of meetings, last week ICANN set out its meeting schedule for the next year and a half. It had already announced that next year's annual general meeting would be in Mumbai, March 7th through 12th. But last week, it rounded out the calendar for next year. Its policy meeting in 2026 will be in Sevilla, Spain. That's June 8th through 11th. And the annual general meeting will be in Muscat, Oman, October 17 to 22. This is where last week's meeting was supposed to take place, but it was moved to Dublin due to conflict in the Middle East. And then ICANN had already announced that the 2027 Community Forum in the spring of 2027 would be in Lisbon. And now it has selected Vancouver for its policy forum that will be in June 2027. On the news front, GoDaddy announced Q3 earnings Thursday afternoon. And the domain aftermarket was a big winner. The aftermarket grew 28% in Q3 of this year compared to the same quarter of 2024. On the investor conference call, the company said it saw a return of high-dollar aftermarket sales. Overall revenue was $1.3 billion for the company, and it raised guidance after a solid quarter. Last week, I ran an analysis of Registry Lock, a paid service that VeriSign and other registries offer through domain registrars. Registry Lock is very different from Registrar Lock. If someone wants to make a change to a domain, such as update its name servers, Registry Lock triggers additional verification steps between the registrar and the registry. It's a good service for companies with important domain names to use, as it can prevent some types of domain and internet traffic hijackings. I looked at the .com and .net domains in the top 100 most trafficked domains according to Cloudflare and found that 70% of them have Registry Lock. Interestingly, although Google uses the service on many of its domains, it doesn't on others. I'm also concerned that major ad networks like Taboola don't use it, since a hijack could impact all of the sites that use the ad network. And the biggest internet company that seems to have entirely overlooked the product is TikTok. You can see the full list of those top domains and whether or not they use Registry Lock in a list I posted on October 28th. Also, a couple interesting UDRPs last week. You can read about those on Domain Name Wire. One of them involved Google and the domain nanobananaai.com. Google released a new AI model called NanoBanana on August 12th last year. Someone registered nanobananaai.com and nanobanana.ai 2 days later, and both have pointed to AI models similar to Google's. However, the company lost its UDRP because it didn't show trademarks in the term. Read about that case and the other UDRP cases on domainnamewire.com. Now, let's chat with Kevin Doerr. My guest this week is Kevin Doerr, SVP at Squarespace. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it.
So for those that aren't familiar with you, talk to me a little bit about your background in domains. How did you get into this industry?
Well, a few years back, I joined GoDaddy and was initially running some of their security and InfoSec properties. And about a year into the journey, I was asked to take over the domains team, which is the biggest business in the house. So I was pretty excited to do that and had a chance to work across that organization, product marketing, engineering, design, et cetera, for a few years there. Really enjoyed it. Learned a ton from the people that were there.
Okay, great. And now you're at Squarespace, and one of your remits is Squarespace domains. So I want to kind of understand, because Squarespace domains was moving along. Some people were aware of it, right? Obviously, it was big. A lot of people registered domains there. But then it acquired the Google domains business, which of course was massive, right? I would say that probably doubled the business overnight, if not more. So talk to me a little bit about how Squarespace domains has changed now after integrating in those Google domains customers.
Yeah. It's a pretty massive transformation, Andrew. The opportunity that it presented to the company was really represented a pretty big milestone. Prior to the acquisition, Squarespace had, as you said, been in the domains business, and we'd work with a bunch of partners, but ostensibly it was a sort of side business to the website core business, which is what Squarespace is. So we had a couple million domains under management, but in reality, we only sold a handful of TLDs, ComNet and a few others that were primary to most businesses, and we didn't have near the feature set or capability that we have today and needed to build in order to execute the migration. So again, I was saying it was a milestone. We moved from a couple million domains under management to 10 easily in a relatively short period of time. We moved from offering a handful of TLDs to almost 400 TLDs over time. And we added what I'd effectively say is product parity with what Google was offering, everything from domain forwarding, email forwarding, DNSSEC, all the different capabilities and features and functionality that the Google domains customers had come to appreciate. We basically assembled that over time and in a very, very short period of a couple of quarters. It was a big milestone for us, and learning how to scale up on all the different facets was not trivial, but really, really interesting to do.
Well, and as you mentioned, I mean, the couple million domains under management previously, that was probably mostly people who had set up websites on Squarespace. Is that fair to say?
Exactly. By the way, I've got my website, but I'd like to have a custom domain to work off.
Right. Of. So this is a very different customer base. Obviously, people, I guess, domains first, or people who register a domain somewhere and then connect it to something else. So talk to me about the challenges there and who you see as your primary customer now under the domain side of Squarespace.
That's a really good question. I mean, our primary customer is a domains customer. Anyone who's interested in creating or establishing their own digital identity, owning a piece of that as opposed to giving it away to a different platform, including Squarespace. So that hasn't changed. What is different is that a large percentage of the migrated customers that came to us were IT professionals and technical pros. And so what we find is we've got this sort of bifurcation in the audience. You've got the core Squarespace customer, of which we continue to add tons and tons every month. And they're interested in ease of use and flexibility and simplicity. And then we've got a large contingent of both migrated customers, but also new customers who come in who are IT pros, right? They're much more technically proficient. They're going to look for more advanced security, more advanced privacy, different settings, things like that. They want to add 50 custom records in DNS. Our Squarespace customers want to use the MX defaults that we give them, the presets that we give them. And so we have this notion of being able to provide a progressive experience so that all customers get what they need. It's sort of, simplicity by design and sort of complexity on demand is the way we kind of look at it, the way we design the product and how we prioritize our roadmap.
Yeah, because I imagine, that is a pretty jarring bifurcation, right? That, when I think of someone who creates a site on Squarespace, I don't mean to belittle it because I know it's pretty sophisticated, but generally speaking, it's someone who's like, I want a WYSIWYG kind of design here, as opposed to I'm going to spin up my own WordPress and that sort of stuff. So I imagine that too, was there a lot of kind of brand blowback from those GoDaddy customers that are like, wait, Squarespace domains now, my domain's over here, what's going on, that sort of thing?
I think the Google customers, were, again, the vast majority being technically proficient. I don't think it's tremendously interesting to them which registrar they're sitting with, as long as they can set it and forget it. And when they need to go in and change DNS records or do some forwarding or something like that, they have all the capability. Our chief concern was making sure that when they did come over and start to log in, that they found themselves in an environment that was familiar to them. in the sense that those settings were available to them. That level of complexity, that level of technical sophistication was available to them. And I think once we get past that first hurdle of we know what we're doing, we have all the features you need, the complexity is there as you need it, go ahead and use it. Once we get past that first hurdle, then the migrated customers didn't find any challenge with that. Now, again, Google exiting the domain business was a big thing. I know it was a shock to the industry as well. One of the sort of precepts of working with Squarespace is they wanted to make sure that their customers were going to land well. And we showed up for that.
Yeah. So a follow-up on that landing well. I know for the first year, the price remained the same as it was at Google, but I know that when I go to the site now, it's $14 for the first year, and then it says $20 after that. So from a pricing standpoint, how are you managing that?
Yeah, I've tried to be really, really thoughtful about our overall pricing strategy and how we want to play in the industry. Squarespace itself is a premium product. There's definitely the sort of WYSIWYG part of the website building, but it's also incredibly sophisticated in terms of your ability to express and the flexibility to use design as a central element for it. But in the domain space, I didn't want to get into a premium space where we're overpricing in the marketplace. So we've tried to take our pricing strategy that will allow us to enable as many customers to start their business, reasonably cheaply as they can, and then work through, some of the CCTLDs and some of the higher premium names that we've started to integrate into our search. With the migrated base, I've tried to be extremely thoughtful. Google offered a terrific price at $12. $12 is the price. That was it. They have moved to a slightly higher renewal price, but we've really tried to be thoughtful about sort of staging and making it reasonable for them.
I noticed one thing after the transition, when you looked at the old Google Domains business, the accreditation there, the number of registrations did drop fairly significantly for a while, but it seems like now for the past, 12, 18, maybe even 24 months. I don't know. I'm trying to think. When was the acquisition again?
Boy, I think we did the final migration in July of 24.
Okay. So it's kind
of crazy.
Yeah. So I guess bottom line here, so I won't quiz either of us on the dates because it's all kind of a blur, but it went down quite a bit, but then it stabilized and now it's back in growth mode.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I still have some trauma from those couple of quarters there. I've never moved anything this large. I've migrated a couple of million customers on email before, which has its own complexity. I've done it in fintech, but I certainly haven't moved 10 million of anything, even if the data object and the structure was fairly standard. So a little trauma there. I think from a size point of view, we're well north of 12 million domains under management at this point. And you're correct. We saw a little bit of drawdown. And what we found was that there were some percentage of domains in Google in the migrated base that were not intending to renew, right? These were sort of very dormant, sort of, I don't know how to call them, sort of leftovers, if you will. And there were tranches in there of contact information was no longer available. Payment information was no longer. And so you saw a little bit of drawdown before we kind of started to pick up on the other side. But our growth has been substantial. And picking up the baton from Google from a search point of view, from a sort of onboarding point of view, has been outstanding for us.
Yeah, it's certainly a vote of confidence when you go to the old domains.google and it says, hey, contact Squarespace here. So we'll talk a little bit more about product in a minute, but first of all, kind of a big announcement for a lot of my listeners was Squarespace joining the Internet Commerce Association recently. So talk to me about that. Why did Squarespace decide to join?
I think it's definitely part and parcel of us growing and scaling and becoming a very large global registrar. I don't undercut that. I think we're certainly top 5. And I think with that comes some responsibility as well as interest in participating in the industry. And that's not something that Squarespace had done before. And so establishing a presence at things like ICANN, more than just policy review and governance and things like that, going to some of the shows, NamesCon, things like that are also part of that. But part of that responsibility is paying attention to policy, paying attention to compliance, paying attention to things that are of import to our customers to make sure that any changes or updates or progression in those areas is being done thoughtfully and with input from some of the larger registrars.
Okay, great. Kevin, this week, I know Squarespace has a big product launch in the Squarespace domain. So tell me about that.
Yeah, we're super excited to roll out the website reseller API. We've actually had a domains API available since the inception of the Google relationship. Probably not ideal to build your first large API with a partner quite as large as Google. But the fact that they were so technically proficient made everything great. We've really had a terrific run the last year plus with the domains API, and now we're adding the website reseller API to that. So what it'll allow partners to do is to put the two pieces together and to very quickly allow their customers to basically use a streamlined API to search, create an account, purchase websites and a domain together, and be able to manage them through a partner's interface as well. Now, when they're building the website, they'll be in the Squarespace environment. When they're managing their domain through DNS, they'll be in the Squarespace environment. But these partnerships are really crucial to our distribution and also helping our partners grow over time. So this week, we're announcing the availability of it. We have some folks getting lined up to onboard sometime in the next couple of months. Super excited about it.
So to clarify here, Squarespace has had a domains API for reseller. What you're adding is a new website reseller API?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
And so I can understand, well, I do understand who uses domain reseller programs. I had the guys from Opus DNS on recently, which have launched a new reseller. I understand, companies that don't want to deal with all the accreditation, all that policy, all that sort of stuff. Who wants to resell a website platform?
Yeah, so it turns out there's a lot of properties and platforms that are adjacent to things that we do at Squarespace. I would call them part of the overall business operating system. And when you're in the finance, tax, accounting area, business formation area, for instance, or other surrounding or adjacent areas in which Squarespace, we don't have a property, we're not building, there's lots of good activity and capabilities in those areas. There's a lot of synergy and connection between those products and platforms and our own, and trying to bring those together so we can all help businesses get started easily and relatively inexpensively.
So I also know that a lot of registrars resell Wix, Squarespace, that sort of thing, or I think they have been. As you mentioned, Google had a connection already on the domain side. But a registrar, is this kind of like, okay, my customer gets a domain name, but now I want them to attach something to it so it renews. So I want them to make it easy for them to create a site. And now here's the ability to create it with Squarespace.
Yeah, there's definitely some of that. To the extent that we might have other registrars who want to partner with us, we're very open to that as well, particularly on the website side. I don't see a competitive conflict where a registrar is trying to help customers start their business. I think more likely, and a lot of the folks that we've talked to so far in our pipeline are more adjacent types of businesses and platforms. But I do think on the registrar side, there's definitely a margin question. I mean, domains are not, particularly high margin products until you get into the premium domains and things of that nature. So being able to attach other products to it makes a lot of sense from an economic point of view.
So does the customer understand that they're creating a site on Squarespace, or does this kind of white label for them?
No, we take pretty good steps to make sure they understand that they're working with Squarespace when it comes to the website. In particular, our website brand, Squarespace equals a website. And so it's an extremely powerful brand, and it's helpful for the partners that we're working with in turn.
So I want to talk a little bit more, obviously, 12 million domains. You're seeing a lot of volume. You're seeing a lot of searches. I want to understand a little bit here. When I think of Squarespace, when I think of website first builders, I think they kind of turned things around. It used to be we go register a domain name and then go find a way to build a website on there. Squarespace and competitors now have kind of changed that to create a website and then, here, attach a domain name. As you mentioned, 2 million domains and such. How do you see this now? And then how do you see it in the future? Because we're kind of seeing with artificial intelligence, we're seeing even more people creating apps. It's easier to create a website, much like Squarespace made it easier to create a website. There are a lot of tools out there now making it easier to create web apps and that sort of thing. How do you see this kind of morphing in the coming years?
I think the prompt-based building effort and environment is awesome. I mean, it's interesting, it's compelling. We've been doing some things for a couple of years with some technology called Blueprint, which uses a huge variety of business types to use machine learning, basically, or AI, if you will, to preview what your website could look like. And by bringing a prompt-based kind of conversation into that, you capture more signal strength, and you're able to give people a better view of what that website might look like. The same is true for domains. And so we've got some small tools out there today that allow a prompt-based conversation around domains. But I think the more signal strength you can capture from that AI type of conversation, the stronger the level of creativity is going to be for the domain suggestions and the website previews, as well as I think you're going to move more people into more creative TLD areas, right? So where you have saturation and you get stuck, I think the creativity of AI and some of these prompt-based conversations are going to produce a better outcome for customers. At
the same time, on VeriSign's recent investor conference call, they mentioned that AI is helping people surface maybe a 2 or 3 word domain name that they wouldn't have thought of. And I know personally I've done that as well. I've hand registered domains that I've found through AI tools. What sort of uptake are you getting with the domain specific AI tools?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple challenges here. One, there are still, lots of users who just want to do a direct search.
Sure.
Right? They do exactly what they want. They want to look for it specifically. And then you're still in a position providing a more creative array of possible opportunities for them. And then there are those who are not sure and haven't provided enough signal strength where they're starting to use that prompt-based tool. So I think the uptake on that, one, the UI needs to allow, just like we talked about sort of with IT pros and sort of, core business users, there needs to be a little bit of separation. You can choose your own adventure, so to speak. And so the uptake so far has been really interesting. We're learning a lot and taking that into Blueprint and some other AI tools that we're building, but it's not the dominant set of queries that are happening today for domain search. It's still the primary volume of queries for domains are coming through the standard channel that we've used. Now, we've even viewed it with AI already underneath, and we're using some creative tools to be able to surface, again, a more interesting creative search results page for users.
Well, one of the challenges there is speed too, right? Which is it can take people want instant results when they type in a name for search availability, whereas the AI can take a little bit longer as it has to think. And so just looking at your site right now, you've got the buy your dream domain. This is domains.squarespace.com. You got your big traditional search box there. It is very clean, keeping with Squarespace here. There's not a lot of other promotions here, and then underneath that, need inspiration, generate a domain using AI. So then describe your business and let AI find you the domain name. So why don't we just try this live right here? Hopefully this works out well, but I want to start a consulting business to teach people about domains. All right.
You seem well qualified for that business, if I can say.
So it's giving me some options here: neutral, playful, professional, friendly, informative, quirky. So domaininsightconsulting.com, not spelled like Kevin Murphy's blog, I should clarify here. Clearpathdomains.com, clearpath.domain. So as you mentioned here, looking at some of the other top-level domains, domainguidance.group, and then domainguidancegroup.com.
Domain guidance, that's not bad.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So it is Precision Domain Advisors.
Nice, okay.
Pretty good as well. And then playful, like Domain Heroes, professional, friendly, neighborly domain help. I'm curious what quirky is here. So Doma.in. So, and some of them, obviously, some of them are much better than others. But I think this is, and we're seeing this, and obviously Squarespace has this, a lot of other people have it. There are even some standalone sites that allow you to do this. And it is pretty interesting once you start digging in. Even if you don't settle on one of the names that's suggested, maybe you see a keyword like here's nerds.
And then you want to take a side quest on that.
Yeah, exactly.
I think in some respects, AI is useful for helping you remember things that you'd forgotten and then assimilating them and putting them in a certain order or correlation, or providing those sort of little serendipitous bits. It's like, oh, I should go down that. That's interesting. There's probably an SLD with a couple of words that might work for that. And if it's not the exact name, it's giving you a creative push in a direction you might not have otherwise considered. I'm really bullish on getting this integrated in, but I think we want to be careful about overfunctioning. One, I do think there are some areas where AI is less useful or less inherently productive. And two, I think you raised the question correctly of performance, where people are used to 300 or 400 milliseconds, right? We have this amazing distributed system where we can go out to the registries and do the avail check and bring it back in time. If we get into the 4, 5, 6 second realm, which some of these passing the tokens over and getting the compute done, that's not going to work. So we got to find a way to get more clever about caching and about being more selective about which tokens we're using and how we're using them, things like that. So I think for those reasons, we're very bullish, but I think embedding and integration is where we're going to get the wins on this over time.
Let's talk a little bit about the domain aftermarket, domain investing, that sort of thing. So I know now you're selling expired domain inventory through GoDaddy auctions. That was sometime this year, right?
Yeah, our goal is always to make sure customers can renew and keep the domains they like. But there's also interest in making sure domain names are expiring, which they do. They should end up getting back in the market so they can be reused by somebody who's going to give them a good home, essentially.
Have you considered it? So right now, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I search for a domain at Squarespace, it's a premium and a Aceto or Aftermarket network. I'm not seeing those. You guys aren't selling those aftermarket names. Is that right?
Not at this time. We've integrated some premium domains through some of the registries, and we're having
the higher priced premium registry.
Yeah, there are definitely some of those premium domain names available, and we're contemplating for next year what other sources we should bring in, how we would mix them into search results, and also what the efficacy is for our users. We think it's high. We think it's the same as any other large registrar in terms of applicability and appeal, but we just want to be selective about how we're getting the best domains in front of our customers.
Well, and Google Domains did sell premium domains. For a while, it was with up to $5,000, and I think they increased it to $10,000. And I think certainly when there's that exact match search, I have to think there's a lot of value in presenting that to you.
Precisely. Yeah, that's right.
In the last couple of minutes, tell me a little bit more about the API for the new website API, the new reseller program there, kind of how it works, how people get integrated, why you think this is a good program.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a sort of do-it-yourself. We work pretty closely with our partners. Obviously, there's a commercial agreement so that customers are delivering distribution of website owners and domain customers. There's a revenue share portion of that. Makes it interesting for them to do the integration. The API is pretty simple, pretty streamlined. The same team that within my group that built the API for domains has built the website reseller API. So we have lots of experience there in scaling, building resiliency into the experience and making sure all the connection points are tight. It gives resellers a chance to expand their product offering without building it themselves, essentially. And they can also lever our brand. You asked earlier about sort of white labeling versus other. And typically, our partners want that Squarespace brand to be present because this sort of proximity of high-quality brands to their product is a useful thing for them. And we do work pretty closely with our partners to make sure that all the customer handling, billing, invoicing, we kind of work that out. And tier 1, tier 2 support, which is critical, right? You're still building something that at some level has some level of complexity, technical or otherwise. You want to introduce payments, you want to introduce calendaring, booking into it. There's integration points, and we want to make sure that not only our own customers get the best support experience, but even our partners' customers, as they come in and become sort of joint shared customers, get that high level experience.
Kevin, for people that are interested in this, I assume you'll have a team on the ground at NamesCon this week?
We will. We'll have a bunch of people there from the business side, the commercial side, and the product side. I'd encourage people to absolutely reach out to them if they're interested in connecting with us.
Okay, great. And in the blog post that accompanies this at dnw.com/podcast, I'll drop in a link to the reseller website for people who want to connect that way. And can people reach out to you directly as well if they want to make that connection for the reseller program?
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm Doerr at squarespace.com, DOERR.
Okay, excellent. Well, Kevin, thanks so much for coming on the show this week. It's really interesting to hear the story here of Squarespace ballooning, its domain business ballooning here with the Google Domains acquisition and now this new API. So it'll be interesting to watch how that goes. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Andrew. Appreciate it.
That's a wrap on this week's Domain Name Wire podcast. You can listen to all previous episodes at dnw.com/podcast or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for listening.